got you. Oh.
Great. Okay.
Hey guys, welcome back to Dwell Big. A while back, I decided I wanted to make my own poker table. The result is what you see here in front of me, but why did I decide to do that? Well, I didn't really like a lot of the options that were on the market, or I did, but I didn't like the price tag that went along with them. So I wondered, being a little bit more technically inclined, if I could possibly make my own and make it precisely the size and take up the footprint that I wanted and have the functionality I wanted, more so than what was out there, and possibly end up with something very premium feeling and with premium materials, but for way less money. And in my honest opinion, I happened to hit the nail right on the head with that. The biggest quality that this has, besides fitting all of the size constraints and feature checklists and everything we wanted, is this turned out to be a very premium feeling table. Premium playing, premium feeling, even really good looking. Certainly up close, under a fine scope. I mean, you can tell it's a DIY project, but from any kind of distance, and certainly feeling it, it is far from, your run-of-the-mill DIY. And it's not because I'm that good. It's not because I've got all the right tools. It just so happens that this design I came up with is very easy to do. So, for starters, I bought a donor table off of Facebook Marketplace. The donor table had a trashed top, so it was the perfect setup for this. So I got it very cheap, and it had a really good base on it. So for the base, you can use whatever you want. You can use the very trendy black iron pipe frame for a base. You use like a whiskey barrel. You can use whatever you want. If you've got another table, if you want to go do what I did and buy a donor table just for the base of it, that really speeds up the process if you've got something pre-made or an easy-to-make base. So from there, I basically took that top completely off and went and bought a 4x8 sheet of plywood that I cut directly down the middle to make two 4x4 sheets. So this is a 48-inch by 48-inch table. And then the rest of it will get used for the armrest here in a minute. But then I started researching and collecting the materials I needed. I never had worked with upholstery before this, so this was a very daunting project to look at. But I figured, it's always good to be able to increase your skill set with some particular build, and I wasn't too scared to dive into it. One thing I did find that was rather shocking was how cheap premium materials are. This playing surface, for example, is what is called speed cloth. It is what you find on professional poker tables, and the benefit to it, it's not felt. It doesn't have that felt feeling, and the cards slide really easily across it. Nothing really snags or catches, and it also looks really, really good too. But I bought a whole roll of that, enough to do two of these tables and then some, on Amazon for $30. And kind of took a chance with it, but it ended up being extremely high quality. It's really durable, super heavy duty material, and I think it's going to resist spills and just be a longevity surface. But on that note, I also set out to build this table to be 100% modular. In case I gouge or damage this armrest, I didn't want to have to pry and pull apart the whole table and redo the entire table. So any piece comes off, these corners, the actual armrest, and then you could redo the surface if you wanted to pretty easily. That was kind of a big thing and added a little bit to the complexity, but I think actually ended up in a really functional and Good result, and I don't really think you could tell it's modular. Everything's super sturdy and well put together and looks really good. So another thing I didn't want to do is put that speed cloth directly down on the surface, on the plywood surface. So underneath the speed cloth, I put a thin closed cell foam, is what it's called. And what that does is it really makes it easy to pick cards up off of it. It gives it a really nice premium feel, but it makes picking up things super, super easy off of it. If you've ever tried to pick up a card off of like a wood surface or something, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is how real poker tables, professional poker tables, are made. Even the cheap ones, the difference being though that this has the really nice speed cloth on top. So next, that's our surface. That is our foam surface underneath. That is then the actual playing surface. And that got stretched across and stapled all the way around. Stretched as tight as it could be to knock out any of the creases or anything in the actual material. Then next, I fabricated these corners. I actually made these corners out of 2 ply thick of the 3/4 inch plywood. I then routed, sanded, painted them matte black, and then used a hole saw to cut out for the cup holders. These are actually marine cup holders from Walmart. They're like $2 a piece. The next is probably one of the more technical pieces, but still very easy, is these armrests. So to do these armrests, the 3 basic materials needed was, and this is where that other piece of plywood comes into play, not only for the corners, but each one of these has a base of plywood out of that other side of that sheet of plywood. So it's 3/4 inch. And then I bought a roll of this 1 inch foam, kind of like a memory foam. Basically cut these to length, put your corners on, cut them to length minus a little bit because you're going to have material wrapped around the end. Then you're going to want to cut the foam to size, lay it or glue it. It doesn't need glued, but lay it or glue it on the wood base. And then this is a marine grade vinyl that I found. And what is so nice about this is not only the feel is super premium, but it has a really nice stretch to it, which makes doing this upholstery work super simple, especially for a beginner like myself, but it also helps make the end result look really, really good. So you've got that on there, you've got the foam on there, and basically you're just taking, and I wrapped this. I started with one underneath, went through and tacked the line, stretched it around, went through and tacked the other line, trimmed the excess, and then on the ends, it may not have been the right way to do it, but I simply just wrapped them like a Christmas gift, stapled the ends, the corners and all the pieces on the end, trimmed up all the excess, and then laid it in here, screwed it in from underneath, which is where that modular aspect comes into play. And honestly, I could not be happier with it for the lack of effort, lack of money, etc. put into it. A good bit on the design phase, and I've never exactly seen a square table quite like this, but it really, really works out well for our particular use case. In the description below, I'm going to have a write-up of all the materials used, the overall dimensions. It's fairly simple. It's a 48 by 48, and then I chose arbitrarily to do 5.5 inches on the armrest. I think that's a really good armrest width. It gives you certainly plenty of padding. You can lay a phone on it pretty easily, and it also doesn't cut into your playing space too much. This is still a perfect playing space for every board game out there. Certainly an awesome poker table. It's not so big. The middle is a perfect reach all the way around. I did 48 by 48 mostly because that's the space requirement that I had, this little nook of our basement that I wanted to put it in, but I actually found out that especially if you're aiming for like a 4-person family type of table, it's a really, really good size as far as being able to maneuver and reach anywhere on the table pretty much. So, and I also want to touch on specialty tools needed. This is really big on this project because there's very, very, very few. Depending on what you're going to do with the base, again, assuming you get a donor base or some kind of easy to build base that doesn't require any specialty tools, to do this, I needed nothing special. Luckily, I'd already had this pneumatic staple gun. This was my first time actually using it on this project, but I had bought it in the past with a bundle of other nail guns and stuff it came with, but this thing right here was a lifesaver on this project. All in all, I maybe had about 1,000 staples in this, and this thing really came in handy versus squeezing the old style manual staple guns all the time. And then lastly, you're going to need, if you want to do the cup holders, you're going to need a hole saw and a drill powerful enough to run that big of a hole saw. But elsewise, you're talking about a table saw, a miter saw potentially, or even just a hand saw for most of this. I mean, it's not crazy complex. For the upholstery, you know, if you have a manual style staple gun, that'll work just fine. Everything else is either cut with a razor blade, with a pair of scissors. Super straightforward. All in all, so including the donor base, the donor table I bought for the base, and all of the material, every bit, and being fair and counting paint and counting other pieces, most of the stuff I already had, but I maybe had $200 in this table. That's not counting the chairs and the rug and everything else, but just in the table itself, including the donor base, which is in really good shape, I'd say $200 maybe. And while you can probably buy a poker table in that ballpark, you're not going to be able to buy one that's anywhere near the level of quality and sturdiness and just premium feel that this has. That's what's been pretty mind-blowing to me is, you know, just how well it plays, how well it feels, and really how well it looks too. The last piece is the edge trim all the way around. For this particular design, with it being modular and everything, you are going to need some kind of edge trim around. I opted to use basically a door trim, like a 2 1/4 inch door casing, and kind of turned it thin side up, thick side down, mitered the corners in, and painted it all like a satin, like a matte black to match the rest of it. And, you know, honestly, I think that worked out really well. You can't even tell it's a door casing. Now you can, but before you couldn't. And you know, you can use whatever you want for that. I've seen people use various like fabric trim pieces, but you're going to need some kind of trim piece to go around the edge of this. Otherwise, you're going to have the exposed. You're going to have this exposed edge, and then like your armrests and stuff sitting just on top of that. So you're going to want to need something to cover this gap, and then this rough finished edge, and then this overhangs at the bottom maybe like an inch all the way around, and then that's glued and tacked on all the way around. So the edge is not modular, but I can plop out any of these corners and the armrest at any given time, and then that gives me access to redo the surface if it would ever get something spilled on it or damaged. As always, thank you guys for watching this. I'm sorry I did not film as much of the actual progress or process as I had hoped to. A few things early on, I just didn't know how it was going to go. So I didn't really take the time to film it like I should have. But I want to just show you this so you can get an idea. The concepts here can apply to a round table, to an oval table, rectangle, whatever shape of table you may want. It can certainly apply to it. Just the complexity on the upholstery is going to get more as you do something like a round table. And you know, but otherwise the same principles and philosophies and stuff apply. So please, if you like this video, take a moment to like it, comment, subscribe, share it maybe, and if you have any suggestions, feedback, etc., please feel free to leave those in the comments below. As I said, I'm going to try to have a full detailed write-up of materials, hopefully some links to those materials, and then any potential tools that would at least make this a little bit easier on you. But for the most part, if you're already technical enough to want to take this on as a project, you probably have most all of, if not all of, the tools you're going to need to do this. It's just a matter of getting over that hurdle that I had of being scared of working with upholstery. And I'm certainly not now. This gave me a whole new level of confidence with upholstery and a whole skill set that, you know, I was kind of fearful of at first. So, as always, dwell big wherever you are. Thank you, guys.